Hey there, if you've ever found yourself staring at a tiny SMD component and wondering whether your budget soldering iron can actually pull off that delicate job, you're not alone. I get those moments where you're torn between trying to make do with what you have and splurging on a whole new setup that might end up gathering dust. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's walk through why the Metcal MX5241 tweezers might be the sweet spot or why you might keep scrolling before you drop your hard-earned cash on a rework system. First off, think about the typical workflow in a small electronics lab or a hobbyist's benchtop. You've got a couple of handheld irons, maybe a hot air gun, and you're juggling between components that range from a 0603 resistor to a microBGA on a development board. The MX5241 promises to replace those scattered tools with a pair of precision tweezers that can share an 80-watt output, and that's a big claim because power distribution is usually the bottleneck when you try to solder something tiny and then switch to a bigger pad without waiting for the iron to cool down. What really sets this system apart is the way Metcal has built smart heat technology into the power supply. In plain English, the microprocessor monitors the temperature in real time and adjusts the output to keep the temperature stable under varying load. In practice, that means if you're picking up a 0201 capacitor and then quickly move to a larger QFN pad, the tweezers won't dip or overshoot as dramatically as a conventional iron would. I've seen videos where the tip temperature hovers within a few degrees even when the load changes, which translates to fewer cold solder joints and less risk of heat damage to nearby components. Now, who should consider picking this up? If you're a maker who regularly works with fine-pitch ICs, multi-layer boards, or you're trying to refurbish a device with a dense BGA layout, the MX5241's ability to deliver consistent heat through a pair of tweezers can shave minutes off each repair. The dynamic sharing of power also means you can have two handpieces, one tweezers, one handheld iron working in tandem without having to wait for the system to reallocate power. That's a genuine time saver when you're on a deadline, say fixing a prototype before a demo. Freelance electronics technicians, small-scale hardware startups, and serious hobbyists who already own a Metcal handpiece will find the upgrade logical. Because the system integrates with the same advanced soldering and rework handpiece they probably already have. On the flip side, if you're just soldering a few hobbyist projects a month, or you only ever touch through whole parts and a handful of surface mount chips, this may be overkill. The price point is definitely higher than a standard soldering iron, and the benefits only become evident when you're dealing with the kind of tight thermal margins that professional rework demands. Also, there's a learning curve. The tweezers require a steady hand and a bit of practice to get the right amount of pressure without accidentally moving the component. If you're not comfortable with that level of manual dexterity, you might spend more time fighting the tool than the part you're trying to fix. Let's talk practical strengths. The ergonomics are a subtle yet real win. The handpieces are lightweight, which reduces hand fatigue during longer sessions, something you'll notice after an hour of continuously holding tweezers over a board. The microprocessor-controlled supply also means you can set the temperature once and trust it to stay there, so you don't have to babysit the controller while you're aligning the component. In a real-world scenario, I imagined a situation where you need to replace a tiny diode on a tightly packed audio board. You'd set the tweezers to a temperature just above the sawdust melting point, pop the old part off, and place the new one without having to reheat the area repeatedly. That's a concrete advantage that cuts down on component stress and reduces the chance of lifting nearby pads. Weaknesses, however, do exist. Because the system shares its 80-watt budget between two handpieces, you can't push both to their maximum simultaneously. If you're using both tweezers and a handheld iron at full power, you might see a slight dip in temperature on the less demanding tool. In most day-to-day jobs that won't be a deal-breaker, but if you're attempting a high-power batch rework where you need the full wattage on a single tool, you'll have to prioritize. Another point to consider is the lack of modularity. The tweezers are tightly coupled with Metcal's own handpiece ecosystem, so you can't mix and match with third-party accessories. That limits flexibility if you already own other brand tools and were hoping for a more universal solution. From a value-for-money perspective, the MX5241 shines when you factor in the hidden costs of bad rework. A single cold joint on a critical component can mean a board failure, a returned product, or even a warranty claim. The precision control offered by these tweezers can dramatically lower that risk.